Is the word Ankh actually pronounced Ankh?
And how is the concept of life indelibly linked to this sacred African cattle? Let's explore. Now, before we go on, let's clarify something. The Ankh is a cow.
Or at least it's very likely.
Inasmuch as people believe it's a dead concept, this word is alive and well and actually lives and breathes throughout the continent of Africa, from the Great Lakes region down to Southern Africa and right up to the Sudan region.
The symbol, believed by experts to represent the concept of life in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, has presented a puzzle to Egyptologists for centuries, who have been unable to unravel the secrets of its origin.
Now, there have been those that have postulated that the Ankh symbol itself could be a sandal strap.
Similarly, its physical resemblance to a key, or even the Analemma of the sun, although providing some objective resemblance, provides little or no cultural or linguistic support, just speculation. Ironically, this puzzle could have been solved almost as quickly as the word was deciphered, if those studying the sacred language of Kemet had dared to attempt to connect the ancient script to the sacred lands bordering it today. The lands credited by ancient historians with the birth of Egypt itself, being the Upper Nile and the Great Lakes region of Africa. For there, the word itself, or very close derivations of the word, are used to describe the most sacred animal in Egyptian history. That animal is the cow.
As I said before, and I have always told you, cows are part of the Banyankoli and the Bahima here in Western Uganda. That's why they give each one of them a name, because they are friends. They are friends to the cows, and there is that bond which is always there.
More specifically, Africa's long-horned variant, which remains as sacred today in Central Africa as it was in yesteryear's ancient Egypt, probably extending back for thousands of years, since at least to the pre-dynastic era. This pre-dynastic artifact provides early evidence for the Ankh's evolution from a cattle silhouette. Named the Gerza palette, this stele depicts one of the earliest known depictions of Ankole cattle in the now familiar symmetrical front-facing format. It was created contemporaneously to some of the earliest known inscriptions of the Ankh. It gives us an early glimpse into all of the elements linked to what would become or may have already been utilized in the ancient Egyptians' rapidly evolving written script.
The Ankh itself is represented by this symbol, and this symbol is now quite synonymous with ancient Egypt itself. When people think of ancient Egypt, they think of the Ankh. In fact, the Ankh itself is so iconic, it even went on to inspire the revision of local religious symbology. Without mentioning any names, I think you know what I'm talking about there. However, if you compare the Ankh to the Ankole Watusi cattle, I'm sure you can see that the similarity is striking, and that's not the only correlation that they have.
For as you can see, the Ankh is an almost perfect representation of Africa's unique long-horned cattle, which is not coincidentally called the Ankole Watusi cattle.
Now, in the Medu Netta, or the ancient Egyptian language, the word Ankh itself is formed really using two phonetics, well, if you want to talk strictly using three symbols. First of all, we have the Ankh symbol, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Then we have this water symbol, which symbolizes the phonetic for the sound N. And then we had this symbol, which is simply called the AA001 symbol. And this symbol represents the K sound, or the K sound, or the K sound, or the G sound, but either which way, it's a sound that comes really from the back of the throat. So we have Ankh, or Ankh, or Ankh. Now there is an assumed kind of opening glottal stop, which is why we have the word Ankh. Now, what's even more interesting is that the phonetic connected with this bovine head is the sound ah. In fact, this bovine head, if you've seen one of my earlier videos, is where we get our letter A from, because in Phoenician this was turned upside down and produced the ah sound, and then it was flipped over again by the Greeks, who made it the letter A. If you know the rule behind the way ancient Egyptian phonetics work, is that the symbol being represented, the word begun with that sound. We didn't know, or at least there wasn't really much knowledge about where the ancient Egyptian word for cattle came from. We have one word, which is iwuha, which really represents livestock as an entire concept. Het, het, or heta, hata, hathor, where we get the word hathor from. But neither of these correspond with the ah sound. However, if we think about the languages up the Nile, which have preserved the word Ankh for cattle, then it makes sense why this bovine head gave us the sound ah, and makes sense that the Ankh is in fact a representation of cattle.
Whether historical linguists assume that the ancient Egyptian language is now long dead, or they simply believe Central Africa has no link to Kemet, they, for one reason or another, ignore the many examples of this word, which has retained both utterance and meaning deep within the continent.
But for some reason or another, historical linguists haven't looked towards Central Africa as a way to uncover the meanings of the word Ankh. And if they did simply look in that direction, they would have found several words that correspond very directly with the word Ankh. What you'll find as you travel south of Egypt or up the Nile is that you'll come into contact with Africa's indigenous form of cattle called the Sanga cattle, also known as Bos taurus africanus. Now, this indigenous breed in Africa is renowned for its long horns. And what you'll find is that this cattle within the African continent, particularly amongst the Central African populations who speak a form of Proto-Bantu, or the Southern African populations, and even up to the Dinka, is that they'll all be called the same name, some kind of derivation of the word Ankh. We could start off with Ugandan Luo and Akoli languages, who have the word Diank to describe cattle. We can also look towards Rwanda, which has the word Inka to describe cattle. We also have Nkukombo, the word Ungombe to describe cattle, whereas in Lugandan, the word Ungombe describes the horns of the cattle specifically. Just further south amongst the Zulu, we have the word Nkomo to describe cattle.
In addition to this, in Sudan, the Dinka and the Shilluk call their cattle Nyan, whereas the Bari of Sudan call theirs Inkari.
So you can see that all of these languages have preserved that Ankh combination for the description of their cattle. In addition to this, we also have the ethnicity of the Bahima, who are also called the Ankole or the Ankore people. They've actually preserved the word Ankh in their name, and they're not unique in this. If we travel just south of modern Egypt itself, we come across the Dinka people, the Inca people, and they are known pastoralists and have been for as long as their history extends back. So if we look, we have people who have kept the word Ankh or a derivation of it as a part of their endonym, as a description for themselves as a people, or have simply preserved the word Ankh in the naming of their cattle.
In short, it is no accident that the Ankh looks exactly like the beautiful Ankole Watusi cow, solving not only the origin of the symbol, but the true meaning of the Ankh itself. The Ankh, which was tied to the concept of life, seemed to represent the whole bovine, which made sense since, as a pastoral society, every aspect of sustenance, community and daily life was linked to this majestic beast. More than just sources of food and labor, they were symbols of power, wealth and divine influence, deeply woven into the social and cultural fabric of the Nile Valley ecosystem.
Now, making the link between the Ankh and cattle in Africa actually provides a perfect explanation as to why the Ankh was a representation of life. Most people who study the Medu Neter will know the intimate relationship between the bovine, or even parts of the bovine, and the language itself. But tying cattle to the concept of life, the entire cattle, makes perfect sense. They were very much a part of daily life in ancient Kemet as they are in modern African societies. These Ankole Watusi cow, these horned cattle, these beautiful, majestic beasts are revered and they're looked towards with a great deal of respect. They are interwoven very much into the culture, as you would have seen if you saw my previous video, showing that even the Igishakamba or the Amaraba dances that are performed today in the Bahima region to this very day continue to show that reverence towards the cattle. The practice of pastoralism and cattle domestication within African societies is very much interwoven into the social fabric of Nile Valley civilizations and the Great Lakes region. So it makes perfect sense that they would have taken this cattle that very much was a symbol of who they are as a people and used it to represent the concept of life.
Understanding this also solves the puzzle as to why the taurine head is associated with the phonetic R sound. Once again, by connecting the wider continent of Africa to these ancient Egyptian mysteries, we are able to enrich our understanding of the Kemetic culture and connect the distant past to the present.
Please do not forget to hit the like button and support me on Patreon. Thank you very much for joining me on this video. I hope it's been enlightening. I hope you've learned something new. I think I'll continue to connect these concepts, and I'm probably working towards a single long video kind of linking the Great Lakes regions and the cultural continuity that exists there, which actually scrap that. That would be a video that goes on forever. So I'd imagine I might do something just based around cattle, because there's quite a few things that are now coming out in regards to the Ankole Watusi cattle, that domestic African breed, and its very integral part in ancient Egyptian society, running right through from ancient Egypt to modern African societies. I'm sure there's a piece in there. So I look forward to doing that in the coming weeks. If you want to support me, please do so on the Patreon. I do rely on my Patreon supporters to be able to produce original research. If you can't do that, or you're unable to do that, you can support me just by hitting the subscribe button and leaving a comment in the comment section telling me if this has been useful, telling me what you've learned, or giving me some feedback. Either which way, thank you very much for joining me. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next one.